I mean, at this point, we should just start calling the Milwaukee Bucks the Milwaukee Clutch. The Bucks defeated the Miami Heat 131-124 tonight after another big fourth quarter effort from the Bucks. The Bucks were led by their star duo, Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard, who combined to score 65 points tonight. For the third straight game, that duo of Giannis and Dame, they have each scored at least 30 points apiece. So on today's episode, we're going to discuss how the Bucks put together another clutch time performance, take a look at the Bucks' wing depth after another injury has impacted the rotation, and then take a look at some in-season tournament news and ponder how that might look like for the Milwaukee Bucks. All of that and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks, and I'm Camille Davis. In addition to this podcast here, you can catch me weekly on the Technical File podcast, as well as Cheesehead TV's Carry the G and MKE. Joining me, as always, the founder of BrewHoop.com and longtime voice of the pod, Frank Madden. We appreciate you tuning in, and we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or your first listen of the day. Frank, it's another game, another clutch situation for the Milwaukee Bucks to perform in at this point. The Bucks got off to a fast start this game, which so far this season, we haven't seen too much of that from this group. But they led after one, but entered in the fourth quarter down by 5. With the Bucks being one of the better teams in that final quarter, that fourth quarter Bucks, how confident were you watching this game that, you know what, the Bucks going to pull this one off? Oh, not a Frank Madden freeze to start the show. The everydayers know this is just part of how it goes. If Frank's screen doesn't freeze, is it really a Bucks post-game episode? At this point, I just have to say no. Like this is consistent from Frank's internet at this point. So I'll just give my take first while we wait for Frank's internet to come back around. But the Bucks have been one of the best fourth quarter teams so far in the NBA this season. Coming into this game, we knew that, and we also knew that the Miami Heat's offense tends to struggle a little bit in the fourth quarter. Milwaukee entered into this game with a 109.4 offensive rating, which is good for first in the NBA, a 61.8 effective field goal percentage, which is second at best in the NBA, and a plus 14.2 net rating, which is good for second in the NBA as well. Again, this is a dominant fourth quarter team. On the flip side of that, the Miami Heat's offense is known to struggle in the fourth quarter. Their offensive rating is 29th in the NBA, coming in at about 99.5, 47.4 effective field goal percentage, which is also good for 29th in the league, and a negative 14.5 net rating. So for myself coming into that fourth quarter, I was like, the Bucks are set up to do what they do, which is perform well. And the Miami Heat tends to, run a little gas offensively in the fourth. So to see that coming into the quarter, I thought that this would end with the Bucks win. But Frank, how confident were you with the Bucks pulling off a win going into this fourth quarter?
Well, I mean, on the one hand, I feel like you can give Eric Spoelstra a G League team, and as long as they're wearing a Heat jerseys in Miami, like I'm going to feel a bit nervous, just given the long history of the Bucks having some challenges, let's say, winning games in South Beach. So I am completely unsurprised that they obviously gave the Bucks all they could handle tonight, even without Jimmy. I don't know. Do we even talk about Tyler Herro being out? Like they're always better without Tyler Herro. So like,
ooh, hot take.
Not even that hot anymore, right? They've been really good since he got hurt this year, even though he was playing well. But I think we're just at the point now where you expect the Bucks to pull out these close games, and again, they do it again tonight. And I thought what was so exciting about tonight was not just Giannis, not just Dame, of course. We probably need to put Dame first when we're talking about fourth quarters now, given that the ball is generally in his hand as it should be. But Chris Middleton as well. I thought there were possessions where you really felt like, okay, this is a three-headed monster offensively down the stretch in ways that I don't think we've necessarily seen or felt as much throughout the rest of this season. And obviously a lot of that is because Chris has been minutes limited or missing games, right? I didn't expect him to play tonight after leaving the game the other day with the Achilles injury. So to miss only one game. I'm going to call that a win. And, again, 23 minutes tonight, so he wasn't back up to the 29 minutes we saw in his last full game against Boston. But, he had a he definitely had like his fourth quarter, I would say, could be summarized by, that video of the old man who says like, help, help. What do you say? Call an ambulance or call the police?
But
But
not
not
for
for
me.
me. that was Chris Middleton in the fourth quarter. He got toasted by Caleb Martin. I was about to call him Cody Martin. But Caleb Martin, who used to be the bad Martin twin, now he's the good Martin twin. He roasted Chris, and Chris got, I forget, somebody drew a foul on him. Then like shortly thereafter, it was just it was not looking good. It was definitely the Chris Middleton looking cooked on defense portion of the game there in the middle part of the fourth. But then Chris Middleton getting cooked becomes Chris Middleton doing the cooking. That's as right. He gets a huge falling out of bounds. It was a 2. We were hoping it'd be a 3, but a falling out of bounds bucket from the corner, which I want to say that gave the Bucks a 2-point lead. It was, at that point it was kind of going back and forth. And then I believe on the next possession, just basically dribbles right into a back down into a middle of the lane little turnaround jump shot, which, again, is there anybody you'd rather have taking that shot than Chris Middleton? Not really. And he hit that shot. And so it was exciting to see Chris back, period. But to see him making those 2 big buckets down the stretch. And then, maybe the most important play, or at least the play that kind of put the game away. We see Dame with the ball. Actually, Chris initiated the play, gives the ball to Dame. Grissom goes off to left wing. Dame's got it kind of far right wing extended. Giannis comes up to give a screen. Dame rejects it. Ball ends up in Chris's hands. He drives. Looks like, again, the help might be coming. And Chris finds Brooke cutting along the baseline from the dunker spot. Almost a little bobble, but, those great big mitts of Brooke Lopez recover, pick it up, and dunks it easily over. I think Jaime Jaquez was there, and that I think restored the Bucks lead. I think 5. I think it was 127, 124 at that point in the last couple of minutes. And so, yeah, I mean, when they needed to make plays, they made plays. To be clear, offensively, they made some plays defensively, but I think in general, I mean, you give up a 124 rating to a Miami team that was missing, arguably the 2 best offensive players. Not great, Camille. You held the Bam had 31, but 13 out of 27. So again, you think you can live with 31 points on 27 shots from him, especially when he's kind of the focal point offensively. But yeah, I thought just, again, the kind of balanced attack led by Dame, and, as you said, the 2 big stars came out and put up big numbers yet again. Broken record now with those guys going for 30 plus seemingly every night. But a couple games ago, it was Brooke who was the kind of the third guy having the huge. Hey, I shouldn't call him the third guy, right? The other night against Washington, he was the first guy with those 39 points. And Chris, obviously not to that extent tonight, but when you get those guys playing at that level, between Dame and Giannis making his free throws, 10 out of 13. Camille, he hit his last 8 on the road, including some in the fourth quarter. So that was really encouraging to see just in general. And yeah, I mean, again, I think we can obviously talk about sort of the sustainability of being just kind of a score first team in the playoffs against teams like Boston, Philly, et cetera. But, look, putting up I think 30, 127, something like that offensive rating tonight against any version of the Miami Heat is impressive, right? Like, and the Bucks did not shoot the lights out from 3. I think that's the other piece here. Miami, as per usual, shot over 40% from 3 against the Bucks. They did not turn the ball over at all. And so those 2 factors, they still got a ton of shots at the rim. They didn't shoot necessarily that well at the rim, but lots of shots at the rim, good 3-point shooting, and no turnovers. That was obviously a recipe for success for Miami. And again, still a lot of work to do defensively, but I think you look at the kind of totality of this. Any win in Miami is a good win. And again, just to show the kind of control and I think poise that we've gotten used to seeing from them down the stretch of games, was again, just fun to watch. And I'm sure, for Dame to be, to hit some big fourth quarter shots, get to the line, make another 10 out of 10 night from the free throw line. against a team that obviously most people thought he was going to go to, and there was certainly some bitterness when he did not go to the Miami Heat. So for him to kind of come through and do what Dame does in this game, I'm sure he's going to enjoy that. And I think as Bucks fans, we can enjoy him putting one over. I mean, there's no such thing as a bad win against the Miami Heat. Let's be honest, if you're a Bucks fan, but this one certainly definitely enjoyable, even with some of the caveats around, Jimmy missing in particular.
Absolutely. And I saw something going into the game that mentioned the fact that over the last 10 regular season games between the Heat and the Bucks, the home team has won the last 10 matchups. So for the Bucks to go down to Miami and get a win, even if Jimmy wasn't playing, even if Tyler Hero wasn't playing, we saw last year in the playoffs, no, Tyler Hero does not slow down this Miami Heat team. And we've seen this team as well without Jimmy just continue to be really scrappy. Miami's a well-coached team. They're going to come and play hard every single night. And just to focus a bit more on what the Bucks were able to do in the fourth quarter, Dame had 32 points tonight, as we mentioned. He scored 13 of those points in the last 6 minutes. And the NBA classifies clutch time, as the last 5 minutes. So if you take that other minute off, yet and still, Dame had 9 points. Chris had 4. Giannis had 4. Brooke had 2. And 2 of those Giannis points were very, very big free throws. We mentioned the fact that Dame and Giannis combined for 65 tonight. You throw Chris in there, they combined for 82. And overall in that fourth quarter, the Bucks outscored the Heat 38-27. It's just the Bucks in the fourth quarter is just like an offensive masterpiece at this point. But unfortunately, during this game, we saw another injury take place, which is going to put some additional strain on this Milwaukee Bucks team. And I want to dive into how that might affect the rotation going forward. But first, I want to talk about our good friends over at eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. So whether you're prepping for a daily draft or you're scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So we're going to take a quick look to see somebody who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. But if you play fantasy basketball, Josh Lloyd is somebody who you need to be tapped into with. This man knows his stuff. And one of the players that he's suggesting for this upcoming week is someone that the Bucks just recently saw this past weekend, Scoot Henderson. He noted that it might be a little bit rocky for a bit, but Scoot is back, and his value in minutes are going to rise. So if you can afford some bad games, he is worth grabbing. And as we just saw on Sunday in Milwaukee, with him coming off the bench, he came off the bench with a little spark. And we know he's had a rocky start to the season, but he's going to have an opportunity. So he is somebody who is definitely worth taking a look at. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows the championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. It's the exact same with your vehicle. I know for myself, my last car, my first car, things just started going so wrong at the end. And I swear I wish I would have found eBay Motors back then to have a cheaper way to fix it because I was in a bad spot. eBay Motors, with over 122 million different parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Between brake kits, LED lights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your car needs, eBay Motor has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you'll be burning rubber and not cash. So make sure that you keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. And just to mention, the eBay Guarantee Fit is only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions do apply. Want to take this time as well to thank you for tuning in to Locked On Bucks. A big shout out to all of the everydayers who tune in on a day-to-day basis to check us out. We'll also encourage you, if you have some time, to check out Locked On Sports Today. Matter of fact, Locked On Bucks had an appearance on there today as well. Locked On launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. We mentioned the fact that Chris Middleton returned tonight. Was a surprise to Frank, was a surprise to me. Had no idea how long Chris was going to be out with the Achilles tightness that he suffered in that game against the Celtics. But unfortunately, the Bucks gain Chris, and then they lose Pat Connaughton tonight with an ankle injury that he suffered in the second quarter on a really crazy layup that I was surprised that he got the drop. The hope is, of course, that Pat's injury isn't serious, but at the moment, the Bucks rotation is looking mighty thin again. Frank, when you take a look at the Bucks roster right now with Chris coming back, thankfully, but also losing Pat, what do you see when it's taking a closer look at that wing rotation here?
Well, first off, I'm a longtime Pat Connaughton fan, but I will take the Chris Middleton for Pat Connaughton trade any day of the week. So, sorry, Pat, feel better soon. I think typically with these ankle injuries, again, not knowing any more than just the fact that he obviously kind of limped off there, my assumption is always is it's probably going to be a couple games, right? I mean, we saw that with Marjon as well. So we'll see. I think obviously Pat with Jay out in particular, obviously it's important that you have him available, just from a depth perspective. And he's had some games recently that I think were more in line with what kind of we've been expecting with Pat Connaughton. Ironically, the fact that he hit that shot that he did, Camille, my view is always that like the bellwether for Pat Connaughton's performance is how well he's hitting those like driving to his right high bank shots. And this one was far more acrobatic than I think anybody would have liked, because he was, like contorting and injured while he was doing it. But it seemed like he'd been missing those for a lot of the season, and it's finally started to maybe get right a little bit. And then of course, you get an injury. But I think it's interesting as far as the wing rotation goes. Obviously, Chris just being able to play night in and night out. We'll have to double check if we have any back-to-backs coming up, because I'm sure Chris probably is not going to be playing in back-to-backs in like the near future quite yet. But obviously it should spell opportunity for the younger guys, right? That's kind of the first obvious point. Fun fact: Marjon Beauchamp last November played more minutes per game under Mike Budenholzer than he has this November under Adrian Griffin. Would not have, would you have thought that? Probably not, right? No. And I think he might have had like a DNP or two under Bud last year in November. So, a little bit of an unfair comparison, because that doesn't count in the minutes per game average. But, like, easy to forget, right? Like, he actually played a fair bit in that November timeframe last year when Chris was out and Pat Connaughton was out to start the year as well. So those guys being out meant some opportunity for Marjon last year. And obviously, people got pretty excited about what he could be. And this year he's been playing every game, right? So he's been in the rotation pretty much every game. Tonight, 4 fouls in 5 minutes to start the game, which again, some of that stuff, is usually kind of bad luck type stuff, but definitely not a game that he will want to write home about. Missed a couple shots. Amazing. I'm like, it feels like he hasn't been, it's between the injury and I don't know, sporadic play. Like, I'm surprised he was still shooting 40% from three as of this weekend. But I think, with him, like, I think with what Andre Jackson has shown, and Andre, I mean, didn't play until he randomly gets these fourth quarter minutes, banks in 1-3, then no fear puts up an immediate catch and shoot corner three. And that was while, they were kind of having to try to keep pace with the Heat, who were playing, they were up like 1 or 2 possessions or so to start the fourth quarter. So, again, the young guys have every opportunity here. We've seen AJ Green obviously get opportunities. AJ has been firing blanks of late, which I'm not used to seeing. I am, when I see AJ put it up, I'm expecting his shots to go in. I think he came into the weekend, I think he was around like 34% or so from three. Yeah. And so, his shot has not been falling lately, but I'm not worried about his confidence, because if he ain't shooting, he shouldn't be playing. But yeah, I mean, you're going to need a little bit more from those guys. And obviously, I think one thing we saw last game, we saw a lot of a lot, maybe overstating it, but we saw some of the three-headed, I keep saying three-headed monster in this podcast, the three big monster, whatever we're going to call it, with Bobby, Giannis, and Brooke playing at the same time. I don't know if that's really like a go-to lineup that we're going to see a ton of, but certainly when you're challenged for depth on the wing, like, yeah, right. We saw that as the starting lineup against the Bulls 2 years ago when Chris went down with that left knee injury. So that obviously was Bud. That wasn't Adrian Griffin, but it's an option at least if the Bucks do want to go big. And again, there's at least some advantages in terms of defensive rebounding when you have that amount of size on the floor. But I thought one thing that was interesting tonight to me, Giannis, I thought had a really interesting game defensively. 3 steals, a block. I thought he was really active. I think he had a number of other deflections, but they were attacking him. I mean, they were going at him. We saw Bam try to back him down, which we've seen him do that before because Bam's, if he puts his backside into Giannis, I mean, Giannis is not big enough to hold up that well in the post. But I mean, Jaime Jaquez was going right at him, right? Duncan Robinson got him on a switch in the fourth quarter, went right at him and got to the rim and finished, right? It felt like the Heat were kind of taking the approach of like, find your enemy's strength and attack it. They were not trying to, run away from Giannis, and especially they were basically saying like, all right, Giannis, if you're trying to defend our smaller guys, then we're going to put you into actions. We're going to make those guys run around the floor, dribble, attack, even if they're not expecting to shoot against you. They're going to try to get the Bucks into rotation and kind of create some chaos. And I thought they they absolutely had some success doing that. So something that just kind of bears monitoring, right? I think it's been a really up and down week for Giannis defensively, I would say, in between the Celtics game where I think he definitely had some challenges, from the opening tip against Jaylen Brown and some of the smaller guys that he was guarding on Boston. And then, the flip side being that big play against Malcolm Brogdon, right? He gets switched onto Malcolm Brogdon, reads it perfectly, gets the block, had to be overturned. But a huge play in that game against Portland when they come back and ultimately win. So, again, we're not used to talking about Giannis as like, part of the defensive, I don't want to say problem, but as being part of the defense being attacked. But it was definitely an interesting thing to watch tonight, just to see how Spo was handling it. And again, the more Giannis is out there having to defend smaller guys or having to defend guys that are offensive threats, the more he's going to have to be, disciplined about not fouling, but also, finding that fine line between aggression and again, not kind of, again, I kind of hesitate. I feel like he's generally probably like too aggressive far away from the basket.
Sometimes, yeah.
and gets, like Kyle Kuzma did it to him a few times. Like guys are able to get creases on him. And again, I mean, he's 7 foot, 250 pounds. Like it's hard to defend far from the basket when you're him. So I don't know. We'll something that bears monitoring. I think I said beginning before the year, I thought Giannis had a better chance at Defensive Player of the Year than MVP. I'm going to take that back. I think the Bucks defense, I'm hoping the Bucks defense maybe gets to league average, and there's no way Giannis or Brooke or anybody is going to be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate on an average defensive team. So I'm going to go ahead and sell my Giannis Defensive Player of the Year stock. But hey, who knows? Maybe that MVP stock, feeling a little bit better about that at least.
Hey, if you're selling, I'm going to buy it. Giannis was my preseason Defensive Player of the Year prediction. I'm just going to keep rolling with that because why not? But one thing that's interesting to think about too with this Bucks wing rotation is we didn't see Andre Jackson Jr. until the end of the third quarter. We saw AJ Green get thrown in there a little bit, but like you mentioned, he hasn't been hitting from three like we have gotten accustomed to seeing after last season. And if AJ Green's not cashing, then it's kind of like, well, then what do we have him on the court for?
When he's not hitting, he's Gerber baby,
Yeah, like
when he's hitting, he's Pale Ellis. Shout out to Dale Ellis. But when tonight, last couple of games, he's just Gerber baby out there.
It hasn't been there. So one thing I was wondering too was looking at the minutes of this particular game is like maybe Griff just rides the starters a little bit more. Like Malik Beasley played 38 minutes tonight. He also had 10 rebounds. So I want to make sure I shout out Malik for that. But we might see a thing where if the young guys aren't getting any rotation, big minutes, we might just continue to see the starter minutes creep to a level that we're not necessarily accustomed to seeing here in Milwaukee after the Budenholzer years where Bud made sure to try to keep those minutes down as low as he could. And looking at tonight as well, the Bucks bench scored 21 points. They went 6 deep. Again, Pat Connaughton got injured in the second quarter, but the Heat bench only went 3 deep and they were able to drop 33 tonight. So it's something to keep an eye on as well with this Bucks bench and the rotation and how that continues to look going forward, especially since with this win, the Bucks went 4-0 in group play with the in-season tournament.
We
And
buried the lead. We buried the lead, Camille. Hang
I
the
know.
banner. Group B
Listen,
champions.
I think we might have some fun coming up here with this in-season tournament, and I definitely want to dig a little bit deeper into that after I talk a bit more about our good friends over at FanDuel. The weather is getting colder, and if you're in Milwaukee, my goodness, is it cold? It's to the point where I'm like, I feel like we skipped being eased into winter and we just jumped straight ahead. We went from like 40-degree weather to wind chills and below the negative. So we're dealing with that, but luckily the NFL offers on FanDuel can keep you nice, hot, and warm. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there truly is no better time to get in on the action, especially coming up here on this weekend where our Packers are taking on the Chiefs, and Sunday Night Football should be a big one. The FanDuel app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So make sure you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and continue the NFL season off on the right foot. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, like I mentioned, the Bucks have now won their group. Group B has been won in this in-season tournament, which is the first time we've seen something like this with the NBA. And we do know at this point that the Knicks will be coming into town next week for the knockout round in the quarterfinals. We don't know what day yet as of this recording. It could be Monday or it could be Tuesday. That's the part that's really interesting to me as well about the in-season tournament. Like the next week on the schedule, it's just blank. We don't know exactly what day, what times these teams are playing, but we do know it's going to be Knicks at Bucks, and the other Eastern quarterfinal matchup is going to be Celtics at Pacers. So that should be two pretty good games right there. And I'm really hoping for a Boston-Milwaukee semifinal matchup in Vegas. That sounds really fun to me. I've been somebody who's been into the in-season tournament. I'm here for the NBA, trying new things out, see how it sticks. I was also felt the same way about the play-in tournament, and I'm happy that that's here to stay. So, Frank, how are you feeling about the in-season tournament now, especially when we might have an extra Bucks-Celtics matchup on the calendar if these two teams can win their next one?
Well, Camille, I actually want the Bucks to win the NBA Cup, so I don't need them to play the Celtics. Again, not that the Pacers are going to be easy either. I expect TJ McConnell will be reanimated in time to score 30 points on 18-foot jumpers all game long if they were to beat the Celtics, I guess. But my view on the tournament, back when Kane and I discussed it over the summer, I mean, there's no downside to it. Like that was kind of my take on the tournament coming into it. I think people who are down on the tournament, I think were really only down on it because they just were mad that some other problem wasn't being solved. Like because it's not a 72 game season, that therefore, I'm going to be mad about the in-season tournament, right? And so I think, again, whether you want to say like it's not solving the real fundamental problems the league has, that's fine. But I think, again, I also would say, like, let's not let, good be the enemy or perfect be the enemy of good enough, or whatever, however you want to phrase that, So, it adds intrigue and I think significance to regular season games, which I think is probably the most important part. There's been a ton of chatter about it. I mean, I think we'll see what happens with obviously the knockout games. That's obviously the most intriguing part of this, right? Like it's not like the group games should have been that crazy or interesting, but again, within the kind of nerd universe that again, sort of I live in from a basketball standpoint, certainly there's been a ton of talk about it and coverage and people just trying to figure out point differential stuff and how stuff how what all this means. So I mean, yeah, I think it's been a mostly unqualified success, and I think as well, even with the floors being weird and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think it's actually been good. I mean, honestly, I don't really even care what the floors look like in general. Shout out to our big ass highlighter court in Milwaukee.
It's better than that red court in Miami.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, these Bowser's Castle courts, I'm kind of less a fan of those, but uh, but I mean, it's good in the sense that like you immediately know if it's an in-season tournament game because the courts all look different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I think it's actually, I think it's all pretty much worked pretty well, and again, to create interest in November NBA basketball, like that's not that easy, right? Like there's a reason that we've often talked about how, the league doesn't feel like it really gets started until Christmas Day. And I think they've clearly addressed that single issue. And now obviously fingers crossed that we get, some good games in the elimination rounds, and hopefully, I think it would be awesome to see, the Bucks play the Celtics, and we'll see what kind of happens out west. Too bad that Denver didn't make it. I think if you're talking about like the very best teams, right, like Denver being eliminated, takes a little bit of the fun out of the Western bracket. But there's so many good teams at this point that yeah, it just adds another dimension of interest to games that again would otherwise be just regular season games. So yeah, I'd call it a win, and like the Bucks, top seed in the I mean, again, like ironic, of course, given the tenor of sort of the Bucks play throughout this season, and kind of how it's not even like so much up and down their games have been, right? Because they've mostly won most of their games, but it's more just like kind of how meh a lot of their play has been, and the lack of sort of ability to play complete games. But to be here, I mean, that's a good thing. So now fingers crossed to take care of business against the Knicks, and gives themselves gives themselves a chance to win the NBA Cup. Got to get our young guys some hardware, some extra cash, that extra
Right.
500 grand. The Gerber baby needs some food. And let's see if we can get Dame some hardware for the first time in his career too.
Absolutely. The Bucks have to play the Bulls and the Hawks first before we get into the week of in-season tournament games. So hopefully take care of business there, and then we can get to the Knicks and hopefully get a win there. And then either way it goes, I mean, we lost to the Pacers, we lost to the Celtics. If we can beat the Knicks in the next NBA Cup game, hopefully the Bucks can get some get back in that next game in Vegas. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing to see how that feels, how that plays out. And I think that once they do get to Vegas, the energy is just going to be a little bit different as well. But we'll end the show here today. I do want to remind you all again to check out Locked On Sports Today. 24/7 coverage of the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league showing on the channel as well. So make sure that you head over to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to that as well. For Frank and myself, we're going to head out. I'll be back with Justin tomorrow to look ahead a little bit to the Bulls and probably talk some more in-season tournament as well. So we hope you all have a good one. Take care.